Hello, all my magnificent people. Welcome to the Queer Thesperience, passing the mic to LGBT plus entertainers. And I am your host, Casper Oliver. My pronouns are he, him. I am a bisexual trans man and a performer in various ways: immersion theater, stage, film, voice. And here today, I am joined by a actor that I have worked with a good handful of times, actually, Ashlee Craft. So say hello, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashlee Craft. My pronouns are they, them. I am a bisexual and a romantic demi-boy. And the term demi-boy, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, it means that you feel like a boy, but not 100% like a boy. So for me personally, it means something different to everyone. But for me personally, it means that I feel like a boy, but just a non-binary boy. So that's what it means to me. I've been doing acting for a couple of years now and things like that. And I've done some stage acting. I've done a lot of stuff with the murder mystery company and done improv and things like that. Like we go to people's houses and community settings and things like that. And we do basically a live action version of Clue where the guests actually interact and get to play characters in the productions. So I've led shows as far as that and played a variety of different suspects in that, and also did some other smaller things with some short films and things like that.
And the Murder Mystery Company is actually how we met. And is sort of kind of what we're talking about today. Not us meeting, but more your adventure. I guess we'll call it your journey.
Yeah, that works.
Your journey with coming to your gender identity through the performing arts. And we've discussed that you coming onto the Murder Mystery Company did have a good amount of oomph to that journey. It helped you, but your journey certainly didn't start with joining the Murder Mystery Company. So let's kind of go back a little in time to the beginning of your gender journey.
All right. So when I was probably 15 or 16, that was actually the first time that I learned about transgender identities and things like that. I learned that, you didn't have to be the assigned gender you were at birth and things like that. And that was really eye-opening to me because I hadn't known anyone who was trans and I had, not really heard of it and things like that. So hearing about that was really eye-opening. And I was like, wait a second. There's actually a word in a community out there that describes and encompasses the way that I feel. So I did identify as trans off and on a lot through my teenage years. The thing was, as I would kind of come out to myself and I would identify as whatever I identified with, and I identified as a whole spectrum of different gender identities and things at different points in time. But I would feel bad and guilty and things like that. And I would feel like, there was something wrong with me maybe because I felt that way. And I didn't have good representation. I didn't have, people in my life that I felt would have been supportive of that. So then, I would feel bad about it and be like, I'm not trans. I'm just my assigned gender at birth. That's fine. But I never, was completely on board with that idea. It was always just kind of me trying to justify to myself and kind of to, justify away the feelings that I had. And then when I was probably in my early 20s, I did kind of low-key identify as gender nonconforming. But I just, I wasn't out to anybody. It was just kind of like, I kind of don't really feel like a girl. I didn't know really what the word for it was. And then about a year ago, I learned more about non-binary identities. Actually, one of the things that this time round, there was two things that were key things that helped me feel better about being non-binary as I learned more about it and things like that. Because the problem when I was a teenager was that I felt like people wouldn't accept me and things like that for being trans. I felt that, there wouldn't be a place for me in the world being trans and nobody would like me, et cetera, et cetera. But two key things that really meant a lot to me. One of them was the TV show Good Omens. That really helped me because first of all, the whole show just being, kind of queer coded and such like that has a very positive view of gender and things like that. Gender is treated really casually, but also really respectfully in the show. Like Crowley, when he was presenting, in a feminine way as the nanny and things like that, that was it for the first time. It was somebody that was presumably, masculine, presenting as a feminine person, and it not being the butt of a joke. It was treated perfectly respectfully, and everyone in the show and all the other characters just accepted it. The same with like Aziraphale, inhabiting Madame Tracy's body and things like that, and it just being like, okay, no big deal. And additionally, characters that were androgynous, like Beelzebub, and even Pollution, using they them pronouns but being masculine, things like that, and like some of the angels and stuff like Michael and things like that had masculine names but were played by women. All that meant a lot to me, because it was me seeing representation finally of gender being treated in a casual way, and also seeing some non-binary identities and things like that. And it helped me, feel like I could be accepted out in the world for being who I was. The second thing that also helped me was, there's a fashion company that's based in California. It's a small company. It's ran by a mom and her kids and stuff like that. It's called Tiny Bangs. You can find them on Instagram at tiny.bangs. And they just have, first of all, I love the kids' sense of fashion and things like that. But the most important thing is, around the same time that I realized I was non-binary, one of the mom's children came out as non-binary. And they actually have a book that's going to be released soon. I think they're like getting ready to do pre-orders or something like that. But it's her kid, explaining their gender identity and kind of their journey to coming to that. And seeing just when that child came out and was so accepted for being non-binary, and just seeing like the whole community on their Instagram and things like that being so accepting and stuff like that, that meant a lot to me, because all of those things collectively made me realize the fact that I could be who I was, and that I could be accepted, and that it wasn't an abnormal thing, and there was this whole community of people out in the world that also felt the same way.
Yeah, and that sort of representation is really important, wherever it comes from. Honestly, I kind of found my trans representation in fan base and not in like canonical, like, for example, there are various characters that I really relate to that aren't canonically trans, but the fandom will kind of get behind that.
Yeah.
And like Newt Geisler from Pacific Rim, a lot of people are like, that guy's trans. I mean, he's completely pan, so
it works.
We can also just make him trans. But when you see that canonical representation in fiction, or also just seeing like the Instagram account, those are people living these real lives and getting that real acceptance, and that's really important. So we kind of touched a bit on how things like Good Omens and all that helped you, which is, sort of in realm with what we're talking about. But how has your personal adventure within the performing arts played into coming into your own with your gender identity?
So it actually started back in the very first thing I was cast in. That was the first time that on a stage, or anywhere for that matter, I got to present as a masculine character. And within the context of the play, that play was actually Leading Ladies by Ken Ludwig. I was playing the role of Audrey, who's a really feminine character and things like that, and she's the love interest of one of the main characters. But one of my favorite scenes to perform in that play each time we did it was a scene where the characters are within the play putting on their own version of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. And the character Audrey was actually like playing Sebastian in the play. So for that, I got to, wear a masculine outfit and things like that. And I got to talk in a deep voice, and that was what I was supposed to do. And even though it was supposed to be my character cross-dressing as a masculine character, I still really took that and owned it. And I read the play and things like that so that I could play it as well as possible, even just for this, 4 lines that I had on the stage. The second play I was in was also a Ken Ludwig play. And that one was Shakespeare in Hollywood. For that, I was really excited about that role because I got to play the role of Puck. And Puck in that play is meant to be played by a woman, but is supposed to be a masculine character. So I was really excited when I got cast as Puck, because I got to finally, kind of be androgynous, gender neutral and things like that in a stage thing, and play a character that was perceived as male. So that was a lot of fun, and it gave me a lot of gender euphoria, especially at the end when we would have like our meet and greet and things like that, when people that had been in the audience would come down the line and they would get to me and they'd be like, oh, I thought you were a boy. Or they would actually, some people even ask me, are you a boy or a girl? And I was like, yes, that was exactly what I was going for. And it was exciting to me for the first time in my life in those types of roles to be on a stage and be performing and not be seen as a woman. And then with the Murder Mystery Company, that has helped my gender identity a lot, because like when I started with the company and things, like when I went to the first audition, I was expecting that I was going to have to, kind of femme it up, as I've had to do for a lot of auditions and things like that. I at least felt like I had to do that in order to have a chance of getting the role. When I went to the Murder Mystery Company, I very quickly realized it was an accepting environment and things like that, and I could be myself there.
I think it all started because of one of my bumper stickers.
Yes, it did. It totally did. It did. I saw a trans pride bumper sticker on the way in. I said, somebody here is trans. And then I was excited. I was like, I don't have to be nervous about this. And then I went in, I saw that you come out, and I was like, trans.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I could be myself here.
I walk in, and anyone with any semblance of a trans dar or a queer dar will see me and go,
Yep.
Just radiate.
Yep.
There's a reason that I don't hide it, especially at auditions, because one, if that's going to make anyone uncomfortable, don't want the troupe. With me being a director, I want to make sure that the community that is within this troupe is very accepting, and two, for exactly like with you and someone else who came in the same round of auditions that you did, I want them to, if they are in the same boat as not knowing if they have to present femininely or masculinely or whatever, what name they have to use, I would love for them to be able to see me and just like have that sigh of relief of, okay, no, I can be
exactly
who I want to be. Taking it back a little bit, I really resonate with your story of coming out, going back in, because I've known that I like people of all genders with varying levels of preferences ever since I was very young. And I blame My Fair Lady, the movie, with Audrey Hepburn and Jeremy Brett for that. That is entirely their credit. And then Mia Jovovich in the Resident Evil movies didn't help. And so, which is this thing that I've known that since I was very little. And also, I saw Chicago, the movie, when I was way too young, to be completely honest. Definitely was some part of an awakening for me, but I digress.
Yep.
But I've known that I am some shade of trans ever since I was about 16. And I latched onto non-binary, and then I latched onto demi-girl, and then I was like, well, wait, maybe I'm the opposite end, and I latched onto demi-boy, and I was all over the place. And then I, just a few years ago, right before my now fiance and I got together, I was like, no, I'm a man, or at least mostly a man. I want to be perceived as a man. And before I could start HRT, I had some horrendous backlash from people in my life. So I just retreated fully back into the closet. It's like, no, it's a phase. Haha. No, you were right. This is nothing. Da da da. And I used non-binary, they, them, but I presented hyper femininely for years. And when I was doing theater, I was only playing very hyper feminine characters, either like love interests, or I've played like 6 moms. When I did a show for college, every single character I played, because people were playing multiple characters from multiple skits, every character I played was a mom. And one time I played the mom of a trans boy, and that was this really powerful piece for me, because it was like the supportive mom fighting the transphobic dad. And so like I got to say things to the transphobic husband that I have always wanted to say to transphobic people in my life. But it wasn't until like the Murder Mystery Company that I actually started to play male roles, because fun fact, as the director, I cast
Yup.
like, I'm playing Sal. I'm not playing the maid because I'm a man, and that's
exactly.
But so that really resonates with me, and just in that struggle to find that identity, but also like the gender euphoria that comes with it. Like, as I've told you before, the first time I ever did Midnight at the Masquerade, when I died and then came back as the detective. When I first saw him, even though that show was a disaster, that show was a mess, it had gone way off the rails very early on. But I went back into the back and like looked at myself in the detective coat with the tie and the badge and the hat and everything. And it was just this sense of, this is it. I am never going back to playing female roles. And one time during peak season, we had an actor drop. They were sick, so it's understandable that they dropped. But I was then left with the show going out, and I messaged someone at HQ and said, should I suck it up and get a maid's dress? Should I just go, you know? And then that person actually called me and said, do not dare do that to yourself. I would rather send a show and actor short than you do that to yourself.
That's awesome.
That's kind of the beauty of the company we work for. But the show that you and I first did together was A Midnight at the Masquerade, which was not a disaster. It was actually a very good show. It was
awesome.
It was for a wedding anniversary.
Yep, I think 25th wedding anniversary.
It was.
Yep.
Everyone who was at that party had been at the wedding. So all these people had been close friends. And you played Jessica Fletcher.
Yes.
And the first few shows you did, I think you mentioned that you played very feminine presenting characters.
Yeah. The first 2 shows, actually, I played Jessica Fletcher, so.
Yeah. And then the first time you played a masculine presenting role was your 3rd show.
Yep.
And I was like, Ashlee can do a solo show. That's fine.
Yeah, it's my 3rd show. I got this.
So tell me a bit about that.
That was actually kind of a turning point experience in me discovering my gender identity, because that was the first time that I actually got to play a role that was supposed to be male, as opposed to some of the stage theater things. It was more supposed to be, a cross-dressing type role. This was the first time that I was able to play a role as male, and it wasn't necessarily that I was cast in an inherently male role. The detective can be any gender. And, I know that I saw in the script that it said, if it's a woman should play the detective as a woman, a man should play it as a man. And I went up to you and I was like, I would like to play this as a man. Is that okay? And you're like, yeah, of course it is. You're like, you said you were the last person to ever tell me how it should be played. So I went out there, went to do my first solo show, but also my first time of truly playing a male character. And kind of like your experience, like when you looked in the mirror wearing the detective coat and everything, that was basically the same experience that I had. I put on the detective coat and I went out there and played this masculine character. Like the detective's name is Peter Ness, and it was really great because the guests throughout the evening, like sometimes they would misgender my character. For the most part, they were very, very good about it. And the best part was like when they would misgender my character, another guest would be like, no, he's a guy. His name's Peter. So, like, I don't think there was any time that someone misgendered my character that they weren't corrected by another guest at the party. And that was exciting for me because I'm like, this is the first time that, whether or not, regardless of what gender people think I actually am, I'm playing a character and they are seeing this character as male. So that was a really gender euphoric experience.
Yeah, and that's part of the beauty of this is there are queer performers all across the country with American Immersion Theater and the Murder Mystery Company, and that does include trans. And within our troupe alone, we have 5 trans actors like that, and we are not a big troupe. We are not a big troupe. That like for every 5 people that you see, it's gonna be 1 trans person. Like we are not. And I'm so happy that you were able to have that experience, because it's very important for trans people to be able to play the roles for the gender that they are, and not that they were assigned at birth. Definitely. And for example, like I've joked, and I know that I can cast you as male or female because you have told me. Well, I should say male presenting and female presenting.
Exactly.
But you've told me that you don't mind playing it either way.
Exactly.
And you make a awesome Ula, and you also make an awesome Sir Warren piece, and you also make, so like you can cover all. Exactly. And like same with Tristan in our troupe. Yeah. I'll honestly only cast him as a female presenting role if he requests it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because one, he pulls off Juan and Joey much better than like Luna and Brooks.
Definitely.
But he still rocked Jessica Flesher. Like,
absolutely.
Rocked that. First show I ever did with him, he was Jessica Flesher, and he put on that wig and those pump shoes, and I was...
Oh, that's awesome.
It was me.
Yep.
But you, in that sense, are like, you're like my little casting Swiss Army knife.
Definitely.
Like, I need a Warren, Ashlee. I need a Joey, Ashlee. I need a Dawn or a Brooks, Ashlee.
Exactly.
So, and that's kind of the beauty of it, but I've really seen you grow immensely as a person and as an actor since I met you early last September. And it's honestly been an honor and a privilege to be a part of your journey. And how do you think that you being able to present masculinely as male presenting characters,
yeah,
finding that comfort and that euphoria has affected your day-to-day life?
It's actually had a really big effect on that, because it's the first, like, doing those different roles and stuff, I've got to kind of experience and experiment with different types of masculinity, because the male characters that I've played have run all different spectrum of personality traits and their own masculinity and things like that. I've played like a mafia enforcer, I've played a rich billionaire, I've played an obnoxious comedian, I've played like a sexy rock star, I've played a refined British butler, I've played the whole spectrum of masculine roles. So from that, I've got to, experiment with different things, and also get to experiment with different costuming, different makeup and things like that, like adding fake facial hair and things like that, and just be able to experiment with a large amount of different ways of presenting as a large variety of masculine presenting characters. And another thing is, like, from doing shows and things like that, I've gotten better at passing, because like when I'm in public, I do like to be seen as male, and that's what I prefer to be seen as generally. So usually I dress like that, etc., etc. But because of doing the shows and being able to play those types of roles, I pass more without even having to really try when I'm in public. Like, I've learned through the shows and things like that, like, okay, what mannerisms do I need to do? What kind of way of speaking? What are things that I can do that will help the guest see my character as being male? So by doing all those things within the show, I got to experiment with those things, and, things like the makeup and binding and things like that, before that I hadn't really experimented with as much. So now when I go out in public, a lot of the time, more than happened before, people do see me as being male. Kind of like what we talked about when I was at work recently, and like a 10-year-old boy came up to me and he's like, "Excuse me, sir," and I was like, "Yes." So things like that, and like customers addressing me as ma'am, and then I look up at them and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir." I'm like, "Yes." And also it's helped me be more comfortable in things with my gender presentation, and like if it's in a place that I feel safe doing it, using the men's room and things like that. It's helped me a ton with confidence in doing those things, because I've had a safe place to experiment with those masculine sort of identities in the context of performing, and kind of seeing how people respond, and mostly just getting to play around with it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the important things about what entertainers do, especially actors, is we can learn from every role we play. We
definitely
learn about ourselves. Like, for example, I've also played the sexy rock star, which is one of my favorite roles to play, because I love playing crybabies. I love playing crybabies, and I love playing people who are just downright evil. I love.
Yep.
I loved playing the rock star, and even with like the tight pants. I had like the super tight jeans and the leather boots and like a packer and like the leather jacket and everything.
Yep.
And I remember that I was doing a show and a gentleman misgendered me. And it was his wife, I think, literally looked at him and then looked at my tight jeans I was packing, and her husband, and was like, "Really? Really?"
love that.
And it was not a rated R party, but it was just the three of us. And so I looked at her and I was like, hey, she's noticing the good side. You know? It's just little things like that. And then playing Sal, where I'm wearing a quote unquote like effeminate masquerade mask. But it's still given me a confidence to know how to correct people when they misgender me in a comedic way, or a like kind of like how I will pull the whole, oh come on, I know I'm pretty, but
yep.
No, or I was like, I know I got a baby face, but geez, you know.
Yeah.
I don't always do that because I don't always want to embarrass the person who misgendered me.
Yeah.
So sometimes it'll be more of a like a huh, and like as low as I can go. Me, I'm sorry.
Yep.
What was that? So as base as I can. And I've learned that from doing shows.
Yeah.
And learning different ways of walking.
I've noticed just like your mannerisms in walking, that's a huge part of what gender you're perceived as in public, and being able to experiment with that with shows and things like that, and seeing people, you know, respond more seeing me as male when I walk this way versus this other way, and then being able to do that in my job and just in everyday life.
Yeah, it's weird how I didn't realize the way I sat revealed a lot about me.
Yeah, or the way you stand.
Mm-hmm. Like when you shift weight from one leg to the other, or just standing solid.
Yeah.
How you cross your legs, how you lean your weight is very feminine or masculine.
Exactly.
I don't mind so much now that I have more feminine posture, because when people look at me, they're like, oh, that's just a gay guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
exactly.
It's not entirely wrong, but it's also not entirely right.
Yep.
But at the beginning, I was hyper aware of that, because when I first started doing these shows, I wasn't passing as often.
Yeah.
And it started to affect like how I would sit and act at work, as you said. Well, now this is my work, but when I had another job.
Yeah.
But so yeah, one of my last things is, if you had advice, like if you were to go back to 15, 16-year-old you, or someone who was in that position, someone kind of struggling with their identity, trying to figure it out, and going through that journey in the performing world, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them that they should try to be themselves as much as possible and stuff, even trying to break into the entertainment world. Obviously, if you really need the money or something, and it's within your comfort zone of taking a paid role or something like that, or as long as it's within your comfort zone, getting stuff for your resume, if you need to do that, do that. But as soon as it stops being in your comfort zone, stop doing that. You really need to be true to yourself in any industry that you're in. And you need to be able to have the freedom as much as possible to be who you really are. And that's important for your own sake and for your overall happiness and stuff long term. The sooner that you come to terms with that, and all of that, and being able to be yourself helps you accept yourself. I know, like for me personally, the more that I've explored my gender identity and things like that through performing and through all these different outlets, the more confident I felt about myself in general. And I think that that's kind of carried over to a lot of other things that I do. Both like I do art, I do writing, I do stuff like that. But just in my everyday life, my confidence I've gained from, there's something, and it's kind of hard to describe, but there's a certain kind of discomfort that comes with presenting as your gender at birth when you don't, vibe with it. And it's a certain, self-consciousness about it. So when you start being able to present as your actual gender, then you just become a lot more comfortable being in the world in general and being seen by people and things like that. And I think that's had a big boost in my self-esteem. So I would want to let, like if I was giving advice back to my 15 or 16-year-old self, I would want to tell them that. And I would also want to tell them the fact that there is a huge community of queer and trans people out in the world, and you will be accepted. Like, you may not be accepted by the people at that point in time, but there is a community out there that will accept you. And when you find that community, you can start to really become yourself, instead of, just kind of being a fake version of yourself that you've maybe had to be to get through life so far, but you finally can become who you actually are.
Yeah, like as you and I have joked, we've performed all our lives.
Yes, we have.
All queer and including trans people are performers at heart.
Definitely.
As you have to perform in our
Yeah.
society, even if you're a scientist or an engineer, there's some little part of you that's going to have to be a little performative
Yeah.
to get by.
Exactly.
But I think that's some really sound advice, and I do really agree with that. That especially if you're going into the arts, especially the theater community, but a lot of the the entertainment world, have come leaps and bounds from where it used to be.
Definitely.
We have a lot longer to go. But we've been doing really well. And there's always further and always better that we could do. And that's kind of part of why I'm putting this podcast together, is to just try and have a little nudge in the right direction, you know?
Yeah.
But it's really becoming a much safer world. It's still dangerous, you know?
Yeah.
But it's getting better. And
definitely.
It's all about finding community and finding a sense of familiarity amongst people.
Definitely.
You can definitely find that if you look for it. You know, sometimes that's going to be online. Sometimes it's looking up youth groups. Sometimes it's looking up for Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups or wherever. But you can find that somewhere.
And even just finding like representation and stuff like that on Instagram, on YouTube and things like that. Like I know when I was a teenager, it meant a lot to me to see trans YouTubers and things like that. And they were talking about their experience and their feelings and things like that. And, you know, even though I was still uncomfortable with my own gender identity, seeing people who were out there living that, who had transitioned, who had done these things, and seeing that they were out there and they were thriving and stuff, you know, gave me hope the fact that I could also do that like they were doing.
Yeah, and that's really important because also that's where I discovered trans as well, is YouTube and but mostly YouTube. So that is very important, I feel, for people to just, if they are comfortable using their voice, to use their voice.
Exactly.
Not everyone should, not everyone needs to, but if you are comfortable doing so, then I feel that it is important for you to do so.
Exactly, and I feel like before, like when I would make art or things like that, I would be kind of a more sanitized version that I was like, this is what the public will like. But I found that in anything I do, both in performing and elsewhere in my creative endeavors and in life in general, the more that I am my real self, the more people like what I'm putting out there. Like my mental health stuff and my queer and trans stuff that I put online is my most popular content for a reason, because it's real and people are connecting with it, as opposed to if I posted something like some of the stuff I posted before, it wasn't really something people would connect with.
Right.
But I've had the confidence to do that because I'm confident in myself a lot more than I was before.
And speaking of your art, where can people find you online? I will put the links in the description and the handles and all that in the description, but where can people find you to see your artwork and also photography of you performing when it's safe again to do so?
Definitely. So one of the main places I post both art and pictures of me performing is on my Instagram, and that's just Ashlee Craft as one word on Instagram. So my name is spelled ASHLEECRAFT. You can also find me on Etsy, which is where I post a lot of my art and stuff that I have for sale. That's the main platform which I post art and things that I'm selling. I have t-shirts and stickers and magnets and art prints and things like that. And that's just etsy.com/shop/Ashlee Craft. And then also I'm on TikTok, I'm on Twitter, I'm on a bunch of different social media sites as Ashlee Craft, usually without any other kind of things. I know on Twitter it's Ashlee_Craft, but I think every other one is just Ashlee Craft.
And if you're listening to this on YouTube, the link to all of their social media will be down in the description. If you're listening to this elsewhere and there is a podcast description, then I will just list their usernames and their handles and all that, so you can find them all over the place. If you follow me on TikTok under Casper Oliver VO, which is basically just my handle for everything I do, you will see that I have made many a duet with Ashlee. So you can find them through that, or we comment on each other's stuff all the time. So you can find them through that. So Ashlee, before you go, first of all, thank you so much for being on the first episode of your Thesperience. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on it.
Is there anything else, like one more final thing that you would like to say?
Yeah. One thing I'd like to say is I've had a lot of really positive experiences also in shows with playing male presenting characters and having people see me as, as male and having that positive experience. One of the probably most heartwarming experiences I had was I did a show, and in the show there's a grandfather character and I was playing the grandson character. And the character that I was playing loves to dance and he wants to be a dancer and stuff when he grows up, but in the plot he's afraid of his grandfather not accepting him because his grandfather's a fancy job. So he's like, he's afraid of that, and he, comes from a rich family and things like that. So I went around and I was, telling everybody, I want to be a dancer, but don't tell my grandpa because I don't think he would like that. At one point during the show, the guy playing my grandpa at the improv show called me over and had someone call me over. And I went over to him and he's like, I've been hearing that, you have something that you want to tell me. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, people are telling me that you want to be a dancer. And I was like, oh, they are? And he's like, he spent probably the next 10 minutes just going on about how much he totally accepted me. He was like, I know you want to be a dancer, and I just want to let you know that I accept and support you completely in that. He's like, I will help you do whatever it takes to become, a dancer and stuff like that. And I'm not going to let anybody say anything bad about it. And, you're my grandson and I love you no matter if you want to be a dancer or not. And like introduced me to another guy at the table. He's like, this guy's your uncle. And then throughout the whole rest of the show, like every time he'd see me and stuff, he'd be like, I have your back. I'm supporting you. I'm going to fight for you and stuff like that. And it was just the sweetest thing. It made me a bit emotional because it was just like grandpa goals of having, like, this is what I wish everybody's, parent or, guardian or anything like that would be like towards them, with them, being queer or trans like that. And it was just such a nice experience seeing this stranger treating me with that much acceptance and respect as this character that I was playing.
I don't know if there's like a happy version or like an inverse version of grief, but if there's like the 10 stages of grief except like a happy version of that, I know none of you can see me, but I just went through the 10 like all the steps of like anti-grief. Like that is such a you've told me that story before, but every time you tell me that story I get all warm and fuzzy and then I get choked up and I wasn't
Exactly. It was just such a nice experience. And I've had a lot of other experiences that were just really nice, of people seeing me as male and people, accepting me for that, and having, the female characters in the show fawning over my character, fighting over who was going to dance to me and things like that. So those have been really good experiences.
You've had the wholesome ones. I just get a bunch of old ladies grabbing. That's all.
I've had some less wholesome ones too.
Yeah, that's the nature of what we do sometimes.
Yes, it is.
But again, thank you so much for being on. This was an absolute blast, and it's also just really nice to see you. We haven't seen each other since we haven't seen each other in person since March.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen each other a few times over Zoom. Thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you to you, our listeners, so much for listening to about an hour of us talking about the queer Thesperience. And if you would like to follow us on social media to get more updates on future episodes and other little things that we might be doing, please check us out on Twitter under Thesperience, which is a play on thespian and experience. Also check us out on Instagram under The Queer Thesperience. You can also like us on Facebook under The Queer Thesperience, or join our Queer Thesperience Facebook group, where you can meet and mingle with other LGBT plus people within the entertainment industry. We share memes, we share news articles, we have introduction posts, we share reels and auditions, and anything else that you can think of are going to be shared there. So please join in the community. And you can also please be sure to follow us. You can check out our Podbean or our YouTube or wherever else this podcast may be uploaded. Thank you so much for listening, and please remember, all the world is a stage, so just be sure to give them one heck of a show. I have been your host, Casper Oliver, with my guest today,
Ashlee Craft.
And until next week, thank you for listening. Stay beautiful and stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.